Hey, it's Kevin DeWitch here. Welcome to another plugin knowledge session. In this session, we're going to check out a plugin from PSP called OldTimer MB. So first off, if you're new to my videos and new to my channel, if you like what you see, click the thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, click the notification bell to be notified of all my future videos. So PSP OldTimer MB. So in a previous video, I did a run through of PSP OldTimer, which is a vintage style compressor. Now, this one came out fairly recently, and it's the MB version, which stands for multiband. So they've taken all the great features and all the great sounds from the original OldTimer and added multiband capability, which is fantastic. So if you are into sort of emulations of hardware vintage style compressors and you want that flexibility of multiband, then check this one out. But before you do that, let's go through it now and I will show you my experiences with it. All right, so here we are in Cubase, and let me say first off, I don't know what it is, but this plugin looks spectacular. The layout is it's just beautiful. I don't know why. It's clean, it's elegant, and it just looks stunning. And you know, obviously that doesn't make the plugin work any better or sound any better, but it's good to look at. And it does help. It makes it more enjoyable. It's not going to make your song sound better, but it definitely is more enjoyable. So anyway, this is obviously PSP OldTimer Multiband, MB Multiband. It's their fairly new plugin. You know, it's been out for a little while now, but I've recently done a video on the regular OldTimer and the OldTimer ME. And this is obviously taking it to the next level using the same sort of concepts, but taking it to a multi-band approach. So you can see here, we've got a low band, a middle band, and a high band. So it's, it's a vintage style compressor that's meant to add a bit of color and obviously perform some compression functions in a multi-band situation here. So very much in line with sort of mastering type things. You could use it on your mix bus if you wish. There's no reason why you can't. But, definitely something that, in the mastering situation you might look at. So anyway, let's run through it and just see what we've got. So we'll start off over here with, as I said, we've got 3 bands, low, middle, high, and we've got these controls over here are going to set our crossover points. So this one here sets our crossover between low and mid. So depending on where we set it, right now it's at 270, which means our low band is from whatever the lowest frequency is. Let's just say it's 20 Hertz, for instance, up to 270. And then the middle band will be 270, or around 270, up to whatever the value is on this control, which is the mid-high. So in this case here, it's 3.8K. So our middle band will be between 270 and 3.8K. Our high band will be then 3.8K and up, whatever that is, right? 20K, 40K, whatever, whatever the realms are of the frequency range there. Now, to go in line with that, we have this switch here. It's called order, and it talks about, it's not something that I necessarily fully understand, but anyway, it talks about first, second, and fourth orders, and I'll give you the definition from the manual anyway. So the first order selection results in a very smooth transition between bands, making it easy to keep them consistent. In this mode, the compressor's reaction falls somewhat between a single band and a multi-band compressor. The second order is a standard and most universal settings. Okay. And the fourth order gives an instant sharpness and exactness to the way the compressor operates. So not entirely sure what that means, but it's there anyway. So in each of the bands, we've got very similar settings, and they are all standard sort of compressor-based settings. So we've got attack, we've got, one. So fast is obviously F. F is fast up to 2. So they're sort of really fast attacks. So down there, then you got 3 to 7 are your medium attacks. And then 8 to S, which is slow, is long attacks. Now, interestingly enough, when I did the original old-timer video, they had S as something else that was not slow. So now this manual states it's slow. So I'm getting the impression that maybe there was a typo in that manual and it was meant to be slow. But anyway, it is now. So that's what you got. Now, release, we've got the same concept, exactly the same, okay? And on all 3 bands, we've got fast to medium, all the way down to slow. We've got some auto release settings here. So we've got an auto 1, off, and auto 2. So again, their definition in the manual is that auto 1 is they're calling a legacy release, auto release, and auto 2, they're calling a new analog modeled auto release. So I'm not exactly sure what the difference between those are. It doesn't clearly sort of state that. Anyway, I guess we'll just try them out. Okay, we've got our ratio control, and again, on all the bands. And we've got 1.1 to 1. So, the very tiniest amount of ratio compression there. 1.2, 1.3, 1.5, then 2 to 1, 3 to 1, 4 to 1, 6 to 1, 10 to 1, extreme, almost, limiting range there. So hence why it's very good for mastering. We've got extremely subtle levels there, but we can also push it to fairly heavy levels. We've got the gain reduction meter, which we can obviously see on each of the bands again. It's because, each one's going to respond differently. Depending on the settings, or even with the same settings, they'll still respond differently. So be able to see how much gain reduction is happening across any one of those. Our compression control is, I guess they're determining it as being the amount of compression that's applied. But when you sort of look into it, it's more about the threshold control, right? A lot of other compressors will call this threshold. So this is setting the level at where the amount of compression is going to happen. So a gain control is post-compression gain. So, it's sort of like makeup gain, that type of thing. We can set them individually across each band if we so choose. Okay, then we have a width control. Now, this is basically, as it states, it's the stereo width of the band, and we can adjust each band. So in our normal state here, which is N, that just leaves it basically in its default, whatever the mix was done in or whatever your song is right now, that is the stereo width of that band. If we wind it down to M, that becomes mono, and we can do anywhere in between. So if we want to make it more narrow, we can do that. Or if we want to go the other way, we can go over to S, which is side, and that is basically making it very wide. Okay, so we're boosting the sides, making it extremely wide, and we can do that individually on each band. So if we find we want to narrow our low end, we can do that. We can wind it down to M. If we want to boost our high end, we can, widen our high end, we can move it closer to the side range. Okay, so these switches over here, again, we've got the same on each band. We can flick it over to solo, so we can solo that band and only hear that band coming out. In the middle state, it is just standard. It's default, right? It's audible, but it's not soloed. If we go across to mute, it will mute that band, so we don't hear that band at all. Now, over here, we have on, off, and bypassed. With it on, the band is obviously active and it is compressing if the settings allow it to compress. If we switch it off, it actually removes the band altogether. So it will actually reduce the amount of bands you have. So if we were to turn off, and you'll see here the off is only available on the high and low, not the middle. So the middle is always going to be there, okay? If you turn off the high, then the middle band will obviously extend up into the high range, but the low range will remain. So we become a two-band compressor. If we turn off the low band, we become a single band compressor and the middle will take over all the frequencies. Now, alternatively, we can switch to bypass. If we switch to bypass, the band remains intact, but it does not do any compression. So that way the middle does not take over. So in the case of, say, the high, if we switch it to bypass, the middle will still only affect between 270 and 3.8. 3.8 and above will be locked to this band, but will be doing nothing. It will not be compressed because it is in bypass mode. So they're the two distinctions between off and bypass. All right, and then down in this section here, this is basically processes across the entire plugin, okay? So these are obviously the individual bands, and this section here is across the entire plugin, across all bands. All right, so the settings down here, we have some pretty standard things here. We have on, off. It basically turns the entire plugin on and off. Pretty simple. We've got a side chain high pass filter. So this affects all of the bands. Keep that in mind. So if we want to side chain out the low frequencies, we can do that. We can dial it up. So each of the bands will not be listening to anything below, for instance, what I've done here, about 100 hertz, will not be listening to determine if it needs to compress or not. We then have this side chain link. So this is something where it's sort of like how it affects the stereo image and what it's listening to in the side chain there. We have the mode. So the standard, obviously, mode here is the stereo mode. You can switch over to left, right, mid, side. If you do that, it is only processing that channel. So if you want to do them individually, then you can load two instances of this plugin, set one to left, set one to right, and then you can be multi-band compressing the channels independently. Same applies for mid or side. You could have two instances, one doing mid, one doing side. If you have a particular need to only do one side, then you can do it with one plugin, but that's a pretty rare thing to do. We have a link control here. So if we actually click this on, then what'll happen is it'll link all of the bands together. But if you hold down the control key, you can actually alternate it. So if I have it linked, if I hold the control key down, I'm bypassing it. If it was not linked, so by default, they're independent. If I hold the control key down, they are now linked. And they'll obviously, so like when I say linked, if you modify one individually and then you link, they obviously move at their respective level of where they already were. They won't just jump straight to line up. But if you want to reset back to default normal setting there, just double click on the knob and you're back there. We have an output control here, so we can obviously boost or attenuate our output level of our entire plugin. Balance, if we find that our song's a little bit off balance, we can obviously move it left or right or leave it in the center. And then we have our valve, which is, I guess, our analog style emulation, as it says there, of a valve saturation. We can obviously turn it on or off, and we can adjust the amount or depth of that valve processing. All right, so let's have a look at a song, right? So we've got all our controls. Let's see. What have we got? Okay, so the plugin's obviously off. It's set to default settings. Let's just turn it on. Okay, instantly we've got compression happening here, and you can see different bands doing different things. Right, so that was pretty damn instant. Okay, so let's do something. Well, let's start off with a single band, all right? So you can see I've turned those two off. We now have a single band. These have been totally disabled. All right, we've obviously got a lot of compression going on here. We're set to 2 to 1. Just stick with that. So we're doing about 3 dB. So you can see with a fast attack, it's responding a lot quicker. Slow it down. Compresses a lot less. Fast release, we're obviously releasing a lot quicker. You can slow it right down, it will just basically sit there. Go over to auto. And you'll notice that auto still responds to what setting I have here. Go for some extreme compression. We can go very subtle compression as well. So that's monoing the width. We've got our normal. And that's making it extremely wide. Just put that back to normal. So we could put our side chain in here to, eliminate the kick from being listened to. See the meter now, it changes a lot of how it's being done. Now it's responding more to the kick again. Now I'm pretty sure, I'm not 100% on this, but I think the link control determines with the side chain how much it looks independently on the left and right, or something along those lines. With it to 10, I think it just looks pretty evenly across the board with that one there. So now, as I said, we can also, so if we crank up the compression, so if we've got it in stereo mode there, it's even, and you can hear Especially if you've got headphones on, it's very disorientating. It's throwing the balance right off. We'll go the opposite way. Okay, so you got the different modes there. And I think I forgot to mention the blend control. You've got a blend control here. So obviously on here it's CMP, that's fully compression. So that's basically it's like your mix control, your dry wet control, whatever you want to call it. They call it blend. So that's fully wet, you know, total compression. You could go the other way and it'd be totally dry, which means the plugin's doing nothing. And you could obviously blend in as much of the compression as you want. You could obviously go for, you know, that sort of standard parallel compression over compressed sound. So, for instance, that's what it sounds like over compressed. But you could go from dry and blend in. So you could do that parallel compression type model there if you wish. Let's get that back to the way it was. And as I said, you got output. So that, or you could change the balance of your mix. And then you got the valve. So we'll turn that on and off. So unless I push it up to extreme ranges there, it is quite a subtle effect. You know, if you've got very good ears in the listening environment, maybe you'll notice it a lot more. But, you know, for the sake of this YouTube video, obviously pushing it up sort of gives you an idea of that it is having an impact, but it is subtle. You know, it's meant to be subtle. We're talking about doing sort of mastering here, so we don't want to be too obvious. All right, so let's bring in another band. So let's say we bring in the high end. So now the middle will be doing the middle and the low, and our high is doing something different. Okay, so now it's exactly the same controls, and they could either be set differently or could be set, you know, the same, identical settings. But we can solo now and have a listen to what we're actually doing. So, and depending on what you want to do, you might want to compress this a bit heavier. All depends what you want to achieve. Now you can actually mute it. So muting it in theory is going to give us the same as if I had soloed this. Okay, so soloing this is what we're hearing in the middle now. Now if we bring in the other one, we'll just set, so if we go solo that, let's say we set a value. Just leave them as is there. So we can hear our various bands now, right? So this is our low, and we could tweak that, okay? We could go, okay, I don't want to do that much. I want to go lower. So you might want to just do the very low end. And this mid-range might be that high. So you can hear this is very just the low. And you might decide, hey, I don't want to compress this very much at all, or I don't want to compress it at all. You might bypass it because you want your low end to be just the way it was. Who knows? You know, that's up to you. You might want to just do a little bit, or you might want to go pretty extreme. And then you got your mid-range here, so this is what we're listening to in this area. And then again, we got our top end. So you can set them all independently to whatever taste you want. And then once you've done that, you can hear the difference. Okay, so this is before. Keep in mind, we're doing 1.1 to 1 compression. And that's all set with the second order there, so we could try the other orders. Again, subtle change there. You could hear a slight difference, but it is very subtle. Now, this is obviously one approach where you set, say you want to compress each band at a similar amount of compression. Now, the other way to do it is that you can, let's just reset all this back to default. So another common approach is that, let's just go for a 2 to 1, okay? And we'll leave it at mid everything. We've got our band set, so I'm going to set that. I might go up a little bit. So we'll say about 160. That can stay at 3.8. And what we'll do is we'll link this time. We'll bring our compression down and we'll play. So what this is going to do is we have the exact same settings on each band. And you might think to yourself, well, if you're going to do that, why don't you have a single band? Because the difference is, it's responding to the material it gets. So even though I set the ratio, the tacker release, the compression levels all to the same value, the level of each of those bands is slightly different. So they're all going to get compressed still slightly differently, and it can level it out and sort of glue things together a little bit more. Instead of really impacting the whole sound, it just sort of pulls. It's hard to explain. It tucks everything in a little bit. So let's just, all right, so we've got no compression. And we just bring it up. So you can see our mid-band's hitting a bit heavier than everything else. We just pick a level that we think, okay, we'll go to that. So let's say I'm happy to hit about 3 dB with the mid. Now you can see here, the low end is getting compressed differently. And the top end is getting a lot different as well. So if we turn it off, okay, we're losing a little bit of volume. So let's actually, well, it's sort of a good question there. In that case there, we're losing volume. Do you do the gain control or do you do this output control? And to be honest with you, I'm not 100% in that case. I mean, here you might just do the output because you want to output the whole thing. But there's nothing saying you couldn't do the gain. So you can hear there's a pretty big difference between the before and after. Now keep in mind, this song may not actually need it. All right, I'm not saying it does. I'm just giving you an example of what you can do in mastering with a plugin like this. There's different concepts to it. Now, even if you say start off with this approach, right? And this is a way that I would actually start off, to be honest. I would start off with this approach if I'm using a multiband compressor, and I might not go that high. Okay, so I might come in and go, all right, I want to do that, and I'll have a listen. And I might decide, you know what, I might say the mid-band's changing too much, or maybe the low end's changing too much. So then I might unlink it and reduce the compression on the low band. But the other thing you can do, which is even a slight, I don't know if you want to call it a trick or whatever else, but you don't even have to be talking about compression here. You might say, you know what, I want more low end. You have a gain control here. This gain control is not locked to you just compressing. You can just use it as a gain control for this band. You know, so let's do an extreme situation here, okay? I'm going to not compress anything. I'm even going to turn those down to 1.1, right? Let's get these back. So in theory, really there should be no change other than we've got this valve on. I mean, that's the other thing you can use it for too, is obviously you can use it just to impart some analog sound there. But let's say I want to use this a little bit differently. Now, normally you'd probably do some compression as well, but I'm showing you an extreme idea here. Is I could just say, you know what, low end's not loud enough. I've just boosted the low end. Right. Put it back. The way it was before, or I say, I'd like a little bit more top end, or I want less top end. So you can use a multiband compressor as a volume changer for bands, for these various bands, and you could tweak these bands to any setting you want. You know, so like I said, you normally wouldn't go to this length of doing absolutely no compression and doing that gain, but you might do a combination of the two. So you might say, okay, I want to do a little bit of compression. All right, so I'm going to link, going to do a little bit of compression on each band at whatever levels, just at that. Now I'm going to unlink and I'm going to say, look, the mids disappeared a little bit. Two options here. Could reduce our compression on our mid so it doesn't get lost, because obviously compression is pulling it down. Alternatively, we could do that and we could boost the mid. So you've got that approach as well. So you're doing a bit of compression, and you could change the gain structure between the two. Now, the other thing we can do is obviously the width. So if we say, okay, it's good, but the top end, it's not really shining. I'd like some more width in our top end. You know, you can make your top end wider. So another standard sort of approach in mastering can be, depending on how it was mixed, you might go, well, there's too much low end out the sides. So I'm going to say I'll solo the low end. let's say I think the low end's too wide. All right, I want to really center it. You might monitor it. Okay, so it's now totally down the center. We want our mid, just normal. Okay, it's got a nice digital, it's got a nice stereo spread. I'm happy with it. But I want a little bit more width in my top end now. So I've narrowed the bass. The middle is sitting with a bit of stereo width. Top end I want a bit wider. All right. So now we got before and after. Let me just do that again. Let's boost this a little bit. Oh, that's too much. You can hear it changes there. So, you know, this song, again, I don't think it needs it, so it's not really necessary what I'm doing. But you can hear that. You can get a little bit more openness in your mix in mastering by doing this, by monoing the bass and widening the top end. Now, obviously, you could do that same sort of approach using a mid-side method if you wanted to have two instances of this, because you could increase the volume of the side and not the mid, or whatever you want to do, and that will also give you that extra width. All right, so I think that's covered pretty much everything and giving you some techniques. So actually, I really like this plugin. I think it is great. As I said, it looks fantastic and it works really well. It's got, you know, I've used iZotope Ozone quite a bit, and it's got a lot of these features in it. But what I guess the big difference with this one compared to, say, Ozone is Ozone has a lot of these in independent modules. So like to do this width control, it's a different module. It's the imager module. You know, things like that. Whereas this has incorporated a lot of the main features you're going to want into one here. So I think if you're in a mastering session and, you know, these are really, yeah, I think they've done a great job with this. I think it is really good. I like it, and it's simple to use, and it looks fantastic. I can't say that enough for some reason. I don't know why. I think it looks great. So there you go. There is the OldTimer MB from PSP. Let me know what you think of the plugin in the comments below. If you have any questions, feel free to ask them. I'm happy to help wherever I can. And if you want to check out any of the other PSP plugins on offer, as they've got plenty on their site, just go to their site, check them out. You can get demos and try them out yourself and see what you think of them. So if you liked the video, please click the thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, click the notification bell to be notified of all my future videos. All your support is greatly appreciated, and it really helps me keep going with this content and keep the channel moving forward as we progress. Hopefully the video has been helpful. I thank you for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.